Hey there, fellow classic comic collectors. As always, I'm Scott Harris King, and today I've got a very special haul video for you. Nurses in Love. Yes, Nurses in Love. I'm very excited for this one. This is going to be pretty much an all romance haul video. That won't be much of a surprise to the people that have been watching this channel for very long. I do collect romance primarily these days. I try and mix it up, get some other cool stuff too, but romance is definitely the focal point of my collection at the moment. And in this one, I'm starting down a road for a specific cool subset involving nurses in love. That's what we're going to close the video out with, because I have something really cool at the end that I'm so excited to share with you. Before we get to that, I do have some other lots of romance comics, which I'm also excited about. I've got them sitting here ready to go, so we're just going to jump right into it, starting with Girls Love number 106. This is an April O'Day. You can see this is part of the soap opera with April O'Day. I'm a big fan of all the soap opera stuff. She's the Hollywood starlet. This is detached. The cover's detached. It does have a date stamp on it. August 13, 1964. So that's cool. This is part of a lot. All of these ones I'm about to show you here are part of the same lot. Girls Love number 156. Much later. It also has a date stamp on it. November 27. Can't read the year. It's much later though. It's just probably 67, 68. Heartthrobs number 60. Much earlier. It's got the old 10-cent. Heartthrobs 73. Looks like we've got some great John Romita covers. Big 10-cent. 75 with the big square 12-cent. I do love all of these different price font eras. Number 110. Three Girls. Their Lives. Their Loves. Pretty nice copy. One thing I want to mention though is all of these are musty. This has come up in some of my previous videos. Obviously, mustiness in comics, that does happen. Since I've been collecting romance comics, I've noticed it a lot more. I think romance comics were more likely to just be left somewhere to molder, as opposed to superhero books, which are taken care of more by collectors, as opposed to romance books, which are mostly bought by readers. And as a result, I'm just getting a lot more musty comics. So in my next video, actually, I've got a contraption that I'm building to try and get rid of the mustiness. So I'm going to have a whole video about that. This batch is going to be my first test subject batch to see if it works. So that's for my next video. But for now, I am pleased to get these. It's just they're a little too musty to actually keep around. And so I'm like, I don't want to get rid of them because I need them for my collection and they're really cool, but I've got to get rid of the mustiness. So next video, we're going to try and do that. With this batch here, I'm moving them across the room because they're too musty to keep by my head. Okay, next batch, I haven't actually looked at this, but I know one comic that's in it, and it turns out it's the one right off the top, which I'm really excited about. This is actually why I bought the lot. Lower grade, Young Romance 170. Introducing Lily Martin, the Swinger. A girl trapped between heaven and heartbreak. Trying to get this, hold on a second. Let me just fiddle with some settings here. Try and get rid of this glare. Okay, a little bit better. So here we are, Lily Martin. This one I started getting into Bronze Age romance. This is one of the ones that I flagged because it's just got a great sort of iconic 70s cover. There she is in her hippie gear. Her bell bottoms, the guitar strapped to her back. She is hitchhiking off to adventure, and so I wanted this one. Of course, I'm trying to get a full run of all these Young Romance from DC. I'm starting to get a little bit close on that, and not close enough to start a quest, but close. But this is one of the big ones that I was still missing that I really wanted, and so when I saw this in the lot, very reasonably priced lot of comics, I pulled the trigger. Some of these I think might be doubles, but I'm not really sure. There's a lot of Charltons coming up. I actually don't think I had this one. Secret Hearts 153. And look, it's a guy wearing bell bottoms with the guitar strapped to his back. A little synergy there. This one's not in great shape, but it's nicer. It looks really tight and clean. Does have a date stamp on it. It says 5/27, 15 cents. So I don't know, it's probably 69 or 70. So that's cool. Let's see. We got a bunch of Charltons here. Teenage Love 75. Cry Among Strangers. Love Diary number 89. Art Capello, which is great. There's some old women that are gossiping about the young lady. You'd think the Pierce girl would have too much pride to come back home after what she's done. Sally Joe Pierce's family will never live it down. It's also got a train on it. This copy's really ratty. It's someone set a mug of coffee on top of it. Let's see. Teen Confessions 75. They warned me Neil is strictly a hit and run Romeo, but I don't care. Let the teardrops fall. It's not a recipe for success, lady. Just Married number 82. Great cover. This is absolutely trashed. But it's got this great go-go dancer thing. They did this thing for a little bit in the 60s where she's got these like slogans and stuff painted on her body. He's thinking, I love Andrea because she's not a swinger. I'll change my ways for her. And she's thinking, I love Tommy because he is a swinger. Now that I'm his wife, I'll be a real swinger and I'll start to live. I'm with you, darling. This is a really cool cover. I need to get a nicer copy of that. Career Girl Romance is number 72. There's a cowboy. A bunch of scenes. She's thinking, as an airline stewardess, I've dated the most interesting man in the world, so why does this simple cowboy fascinate me? Find out in Country Boy. So is this what happened to Bonnie Taylor after her series was ended in Young Romance? The stewardess over at DC, did she come to Career Girl Romances? Ooh. And finally, these two I have no interest in, but they were thrown in as part of this lot. It's Bobby Sherman, number 3. And Bobby Sherman, number 4. I have no idea what any of this is talking about. Haiku grabs Lionel. Sold. I assume that means something to somebody, but it just seems like a really weird selling point for your cover. You're like, that's what the blurb is going to be. Haiku grabs Lionel. Is this Lionel? Or is that haiku? I don't know. Anyway, these are thrown in. They're weird. Charlton. I have something really cool, separate lot that I got from Charlton that I wanted to show you here. The comics themselves are actually in really rough condition. Well, one of them is. But the reason I bought it is that whoever got these comics kept them in the original poly bag. Now, this has been opened. See, it's been opened. And like I said, the comics inside are not in great shape. But yeah, for some reason, 50 years ago, whoever bought this poly bag decided to keep the comics in the bag. So I paid a little bit of a premium for this just for the bag. This Love and Romances 19 has a great cover. But as you can see, at some point in the distant past, it was badly folded over. And so it's kind of wrecked. I want to get a higher grade copy of this if I don't already have one. Because I think the art's really great. As you know, I love the thick outer lines. And he's like trying to make his move and she's trying to push him off. Then there's I Love You 108. Which is a couple and they're kissing in front of what looks like Trevi Fountain. in Rome, and I think this fountain appears on a couple Charlton covers. I already have another one. Finally, for Lovers Only 76, it's a cop in love cover where he's pulled her over and given her a ticket, and they're both actually thinking about how they want to be making out. I kind of like this cover, I gotta say. I think that's a cool cover. So, again, the comics themselves are not in great condition, and the bag is very dingy as well. However, just being able to get these in the original poly bag was really the big draw. You know, I love my poly bags. So there it is, old-fashioned poly bag. So I'm really excited to add that to both my romance collection and my poly bag collection. That's the first bagged romance set that I've gotten so far. Alright, I'm going to set these over here because I need to clear the decks. Here comes the main attraction, Nurses in Love. Now, I mentioned this a little bit at the end of the last video. Let me just set the stage for you before I dive into my Nurses in Love. As you know, for romance stuff, I grew up watching soap operas. I really love the soap opera stuff. DC had a number of them, including a nurse. Mary Robin, registered nurse that ran in Young Love, starting with issue 39. They had they had Bonnie Taylor, the stewardess. They had Reach for Happiness, Three Girls, Lives and Loves of Lisa St. Clair. Over at Charlton, they had some soap operas as well, like David and Eileen, yada, yada, yada. We've talked about this before. Now, in the early 60s, there was this fad of nurse and doctor dramas, both on TV and then in the comics. And so all of the publishers, basically, pretty much all the main publishers started putting out nurse romance comics. Now, Marvel's was called Linda Carter, Student Nurse, and it was more like an Archie style book than like a true romance. DC, as I just mentioned, had Mary Robin, registered nurse. That was a couple years later. Linda Carter started in 61, I think. Mary Robin didn't start until the end of 63 or the beginning of 64, something like that. But the other publishers had stuff too. It wasn't just Marvel and DC. And so I picked up some of those because I'm starting down the rabbit hole. It combines my favorite stuff, the romance, but also the ongoing soap opera stuff. So here's Dell's entry. It's Nurse Linda Lark. Now, when this series started, it was actually called Linda Lark, Student Nurse, and it happened to debut right about the same time as Marvel's Linda Carter, Student Nurse. And so the two of those were out at the same time. So Dell had her graduate from student nurse to full nurse pretty fast. And they also have these like almost like painted covers that are very Dell and very sort of sophisticated. A top secret assignment nearly cost Linda her romance. So I was really excited to get this. It's got someone's name on it. It's Doreen Gilbert. So very excited for this. But of all the companies, it was actually Charlton that had multiple. As with everything, Charlton likes to get on a bandwagon and just pummel it to death. They had multiple nurse comics. One that I don't have yet is called Sue and Sally Smith Flying Nurses, and it's about two like rescue nurses that go around and like help people that are stuck in an avalanche and different things like that. So they're like adventure rescue nurses. So that's great. I don't have any of those yet. They had two other titles. Here's the first of them. It's Nurse Betsy Crane. And so one exciting thing here is that the Charlton nurses got their own titles. They started in other books. Nurse Betsy Crane, I forget what the title of the comic was. It was a romance comic. It was like high school confessionals or something. And then the last issue they introduced Betsy Crane, and they just continued the numbering and switched. So here's Betsy Crane, Nurse Betsy Crane. She's saying, think, when did the trouble start? What happened? And the old woman's like, Nurse Crane, get away from my son. What was the secret of the old Lange mansion? What terror lay hidden in the dark closet? Now, I should say that both Nurse Betsy Crane and the other series that I'm about to show, but particularly this, they were reprinted in the 80s when soap operas, there was a big upsurge thanks to like General Hospital. Charlton decided to, they had canceled all the romance books several years earlier, but they brought back a couple. They had one called Soap Opera Romances, and another one was like Soap Opera Love, and they were reprinting Soap Opera Romances was reprinting Nurse Betsy Crane. But the other title that I'm super excited about, I got a couple issues of it here. It's Cynthia Doyle, Nurse in Love. Joins Cynthia Doyle and Dr. Ed Benson in the life and death drama of a big city general hospital. So it's very similar to Night Nurse, except for it's a decade earlier because this started in 1962. And Cynthia Doyle first appeared in Sweetheart Diaries number 65. I don't have that issue, but with 66, they changed the title to Cynthia Doyle, Nurse in Love, and the series ran a few more issues. I think 74 was the last issue, so it lasted about 10 issues overall, and I haven't been able to get any of them until now. Here's one of them, and then here's the other one. Cynthia Doyle, Nurse in Love. This is really tough because Ed, my darling Dr. Ed Benson, is going to die, and there's nothing anyone can do. That's what she's thinking here. And here they are, the scene, and she's like, "Oh, Ed," and he's like, "Take over, Dr. Wells. I feel dizzy. And the other guy's like, "Take him out, Nurse Doyle." And then down here, "Could her love win over death? Smash up." So seems like he's been in an accident or something. And Cynthia Doyle, Nurse in Love, has to literally nurse him back to health. So excited to get these. But here's the big kicker. Now, you ready? I promise something really exciting at the end. As I was trying to track down some of these issues, I stumbled across something that I wasn't expecting. That's very exciting and totally weird. Because it turns out, Charlton, Dell was famous for licensing these characters. They'd license like Dr. Kildare from the TV show, and they put out a Dr. Kildare comic. That's what Dell did. Charlton was notorious for being incredibly stingy, and they just make their dumb knockoff versions of everything, right? But not this time. Not exactly, because look what I found. It's Cynthia Doyle, Nurse in Love, the novel. Now, it turns out that this was published in 1961. It came out a year before the comic, and it was published by Monarch Books, which it turns out is the same publishing company that published Charlton. So this book was originally published under a different title with the great title Nurse Lady in 1953. So 8 years later, it was reprinted in paperback form by Charlton's paperback arm, and through some sort of shenanigans or some kind of deal, I don't know exactly how, they ended up putting out the comic book adaptation of the novel. Now, I've only read the beginning of the novel, and I don't have all the comics yet, so I don't know if they took the actual storyline from this, or if they just took the name and basically applied it to their own character. Notably, this version of Cynthia Doyle is blonde, whereas the comic book version is a redhead. There's the issues that I've looked through here, there doesn't seem to be any mention of the fact that it's an adaptation. There's no mention of Adelaide Humphreys, the writer who wrote this. Which I find very weird. Like, why would you do an adaptation without mentioning the source material? The whole point of doing an adaptation is so that the fans of the novel will read the comic, right? That's the point. You're bringing in the fans of the original property. Why even bother doing an adaptation if you're not going to mention anywhere on the cover or interior or anything that it's an adaptation of it's just weird. It's like it's almost like they're so creatively bankrupt that they had to steal the whole concept and title basically just because they couldn't come up with their own thing. Now, I've reached out to a romance novel expert to find out. This is the burning question that I have. Burning question. I have a couple questions, one of which is this a knockoff? And did they just swipe the property? Or was there some sort of licensing deal? Did they figure they could just do it because they had the deal in place to reprint the book? Did they feel like that allowed them to? Maybe it did. I'm very curious about that. But my big question is, if Cynthia Doyle, Nurse in Love, is based on a novel, does that mean that Nurse Betsy Crane is also based on a novel? Now, I haven't been able to figure this out. Like I said, I've reached out to a nurse romance novel expert to ask this question. I have not heard back yet. I don't know if I'm going to get an answer on this question, but I was so excited to find this book and to get these great Nurse in Love comics. Now I have a whole bunch more. They're not that easy to find now. They're getting a little expensive. These were not that cheap. When I can pick up more issues of these titles, if I can find some cheap issues of Flying Nurses, I'll definitely do that. But for now, so excited. I did start reading the novel, and I didn't get very far in it because it's terrible. But at some point, I'm going to slog through and see if I can compare it to the comics. But that's for another time. Now, I'm going to have a video. It'll probably, I said, I'm going to have another video with the contraption I'm making to try and get rid of the mustiness. That will probably already be out by the time I just realized I'm going to make that. It'll probably be already available to you by the time this runs. So I'm going to link to it right here. Here's the link to it. You can jump right to it right now to watch it. And we're going to see if we can get rid of the mustiness, because that would be a big help with all these musty old romance comics. But next time, more new comics, more cool stuff. So I hope we'll see you then.